My name is Sharon Hirsch, and I want to welcome you to this third video cast this week honoring the release of my new book, Belonging, Finding the Way Back to One Another. Tonight, we are going to be talking about bridging the gap for young adults who might be looking toward the future, but the emphasis is really going to be for parents of adult children. Some of who are letting go right now as your kids get ready to go to college, and how we find our way in this season where there are inevitable gaps between the generations. And tonight I'm going to be talking to Grace Casper. I have known Grace since she was 11 years old, and now she is a senior at Baylor University. She hosts her own podcast entitled For Those Who Know, and she has big dreams for the future. I think we're going to be treated to a unique perspective tonight about this generation. And for those of us who are parents, maybe about ways that we can find to connect with our adult children. Welcome, Grace.
Thanks, Sharon. That was such a good introduction. Man, I feel hyped up right now.
Well, it is so exciting to have you with me, and I have loved you for years, and it's a treat because I know that you have really done your homework for our time together tonight. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say, but I thought I would begin with a quotation from my book, Defining Belonging, and some statistics that maybe reveal how we are falling short in your generation and in my generation. So first of all, a definition from Brene Brown, who is always so great. And she says, belonging is about showing up and being seen. It's waking up every day and loving someone who may or may not love you back, whose safety we can't ensure, who may stay in our lives or may leave without a moment's notice. I know there are some parents right now who are feeling that without a moment's notice, your kids are walking into their future, and you have to let go.
Yeah.
Good definition of belonging, showing up, being seen, and loving no matter what. But we're not doing very well with that in a lot of places. According to Barna Research, today there are more adults in the United States who don't attend church than who do. Studies suggest that by the time a girl in the United States is a teenager, not too long ago for you, she will be called a variety of harmful and derogatory names, sometimes on a daily basis. And the profane culture is not that different for boys. And so we engage in websites to replace social function, and maybe that's why social anxiety, Grace, affects 15 million Americans, 1/3 of them between the ages of 18 and 25.
Crazy.
And so this failure to cultivate empathy and to draw dividing lines, I mean, we are doing that right now on the basis of political parties, race, lifestyle choices. And sadly, evangelical Christians draw the most dividing lines, resulting in, I think, Generation Z, that's your generation.
Yeah.
One half of your generation has no religious affiliation at all. And listen to this, 20% of people over the age of 65, that's me, identify as white evangelicals. 7% of people under 30, that's you, identify with white evangelicals.
Crazy.
So statistics matter to me because they're about me and my children, my adult children, and make me ask, do I live in a way that makes anyone curious about what I belong to and why? So I'd like to start just by asking you, what do you think belonging means for your generation?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Sharon. I think that my generation craves belonging like none other, but they don't realize it. I think they don't have the vocabulary and the knowledge as to what they are craving. I think that they think that they're craving a good time or a really fun night or an amazing boyfriend or girlfriend that will satisfy all of their needs. But what they're really craving, Sharon, is that belonging.
And my generation is not that different from what you just said. I think we think if we're successful or have this house or, maybe can eat something or drink something, that we can satisfy that hunger.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's ever been a conversation, if this could happen, when someone from my generation and someone from your generation, in fact, you and I have done this, sits down and no matter what our differences says, I really want to be known and loved and belong. And then you say, I really want to be known and loved and belong. And then the differences fade away.
Yeah.
But like I said, all this other stuff we think is what's going to satisfy.
Totally. And I think too, like the things that we grab for might be different. Like you just said, someone your age might want a big house, and someone my age, we're not thinking about houses yet. We're thinking about like the 4.0 GPA or I don't know, all the other things that you could want in your college years. But just because the things that we're grabbing for may not be the same, we're still searching for that same thing, which I think is so crazy. It's so evident to me that there is evidence of God. And this is kind of what I use when I talk to my peers when we're talking about religion is how is it that someone who is in their 60s and someone who is my age can have this same thread of belonging their whole lives? I think it's so fascinating and it shows proof of God, in my opinion.
And shows proof that God doesn't necessarily give us immediate, easy answers, because you can be in your 60s and still be hungry for that acceptance, to be known, to be loved. I think we just know more that all the trappings are not going to satisfy those longings. They kind of are like chasing the wind.
Yeah.
But do you think for your generation, belonging might be like if I could just get a certain job or be married or have a certain house or join a cause like climate change or racial equity, then I will satisfy that need to belong?
Totally. I think that our generation somehow feels like they are carrying this weight that our parents didn't take. So now it's our job to save the planet, to make sure that equality is there, to make sure that this happens. And we have this need to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yes.
And it's a great need, and it's one that's healthy, but I think what's not healthy about it is we're putting so much weight on our shoulders to literally like end climate change and just do all of these massive things that can't be done by one person, let alone even just a community. It's going to take a lot of people collectively saying yes together in order to see change. And I love the passion and the fire and the zeal that my generation holds. And I think that many people your age, Sharon, don't see us as that. I think that they see us as lazy and ignorant and ungrateful. And
I've maybe said that.
And I think at times that is true, but it's also, we're kids. And not now as young adults and as college students, there's a different conversation there. But yeah, I think that when you're a teenager, you're kids. And so, yes, you can throw those labels of laziness and all those things. But when you're a college age person and now a young adult, you do have to take on that responsibility. And I think now people in your generation need to take on the responsibility of recognizing, okay, they're not a kid anymore. What do I see in them that is good? What do I see in them that is something to be championed? And I think that is the passion and the zeal and the fire that our generation holds.
So let's hold on to that for a minute when we talk about kind of bridging the gap between the generations. You said two things that I want to back up to. You said that, yes, your generation finds belonging in causes greater than yourself, which I do think is honorable. do you think that can become the primary identity, though? Like, I'm a progressive, I'm for climate change, I'm pro-life. And does that answer that longing
Mm,
to, to truly belong?
no. It's really sad, Sharon, because I see so many of my friends, and myself included, I don't want to be like, I'm not a part of this. I definitely am, where I get so excited about these things, and maybe we do accomplish what we're fighting for. Maybe we do pass a bill or do a successful protest or whatever it may be. But afterwards, you kind of sit with yourself and you go, is this it? Like, I did it all. We're making change. And this is what I'm passionate about, but like, why is it not meeting that extra 20%? I feel like I'm at 80. What's that 20 that's missing? And again, Sharon, this is like why I love speaking to my generation about this. Is I just think the gospel fits in so perfectly, because I can say, oh my gosh, that thing that you're craving, like, it's Jesus. I know exactly what you're missing, because I was feeling that for so long that I was trapped in addiction for a little while, and I thought that that could satisfy me, or it could numb me just enough to be okay. But now I realize the thing that I was craving, the thing that I was chasing the whole time was Jesus. And
Hmm.
so I don't know. I find it such an honor to be doing even something like this, where I can tell my generation, like, I'm so proud of you guys for fighting. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm not saying put on the brakes, but what I'm saying is recognize that that's not all of you.
Yeah, I think that 20% is confusing for a lot of us. And so the other thing I want to back up to what you said is that you feel this weight, this pressure
Mm.
to take on things because we didn't. And maybe the other thing we didn't do is give you a picture of a relationship with Jesus that made you want that.
Mm.
And so tonight I do want to be stark raving honest about how we as parents maybe have failed. Yes, it would be easy for me to sit here and say, I do think that the younger generation is not grateful, feels entitled, doesn't know of the sacrifices that have gone before them, and doesn't seem to appreciate them. And yet, that would be disconnecting.
Mm.
And my book is about connecting.
Yeah.
And so I think that means being willing to face the stark raving truth that there are some things I need to own,
Mm.
and then maybe they won't own me. So can you say more about feeling like you've got to find something different or make up for what we didn't do?
Mm. Yeah, I think that I mean, I know that we are a huge part of the divisiveness. And I think that my generation, we cling to each other, we huddle up with one another, and kind of form this little club that says, yeah, our parents didn't do it for us, so like, let's help one another. And it becomes this them versus us, where it's like, well, because they didn't do it, then we're going to all come together. And I think it's beautiful because we can show one another those things and
Mhm.
come together. But again, the toxicness of it, of having these closed walls and not letting our parents in on it, is
So,
really
Grace, I know I can ask you this because I've known you for a long time. Um, how do you let your parents in when they've failed and hurt you? And here I'm speaking for myself because no one has failed more than as a mother than me.
mm,
And so I think anytime we join off in a little group, whether it's with our peers or with a cause, in the body, when cells break off and all join together, it forms cancer.
mm,
And I think that's what's happened in our culture is we have a cancer of division
yeah.
because we're all, like you said, walled off from one another in these little groups. But when you've been hurt, how do you take those walls down?
Ooh, that is a It's a tricky one. I think it takes recognizing that your parents are human, and this takes an adult to do that. So I think do not blame your kids when they're not letting you in because they're still kids. And it took me coming to college, and I mean, my dad, he had his first child when he was in college. So to think of me having a kid right now, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything, you know? And so it allowed me to have more empathy for my dad and seeing, wow, he's a human. And I think we grew up thinking that our parents are just so great and they know all the answers to everything and they're just on this pinnacle. And when you start to see their brokenness and when you start to see that they're hurting you, you want to just throw them to the side and say, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And when you learn that they're just human, it's almost like your compassion and your empathy grows deeper. And then on the reverse side of that, when you see that you are human and you've messed up and you've hurt your parents, then I think that's when the wall can start to come down. But it is a long process, and it is one that needs to be done with safe people that you can trust and kind of talk it through with.
And I think that's where we go back to that 20% that is missing from so many lives, which is believing the good news that in God's economy, love is not a dictator.
Yes.
What I just read from Brene Brown, that loves when someone doesn't love you back.
Yeah.
Love when someone's loyal or not loyal. When someone stays with you or leaves in a moment's notice. The only person who I know that does that perfectly is God.
Amen.
And I think as we connect to that and then add the causes and the groups that we want to be in, and certainly the things for your generation of getting married and finding a career and changing the world. And for my generation of letting go and remaking ourselves and reorienting ourselves as, no longer being mommy and daddy, but really being our own person with our own relationship with God. I mean, you asked for this program what I wish I would have known as I started out this mothering. And I would have known that my children do not belong to me. I think my worst moments are when I've acted like they do. Like I've been embarrassed because maybe they say the F word in the middle of a basketball game at a Christian school, or because of something they wear or something they believe, or I feel like I need to rescue them because they belong to me. And no, they are a magnificent loan for a season, but they belong to God. And so I know you did a survey of your peers of what they would like to see from their parents that might be more reflective of that truth, that you guys belong to God, and what you do with him is your business. And we can pray about it, we can lose sleep over it, or we can get busy showing up, being seen, loving no matter what, which is what we're all called to.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things you heard?
Well, before I read these, I just want to quickly say, I think what's really cool about what you just said, Sharon, is because your kids are not yours and they are God's, that applies to everyone. And I think what's made me the woman I am is that I had so many spiritual parents like looking out for me and realizing that my two parents can't do it all. And they're not overstepping by being available to me as a second parent. And I think that if, as parents, even though I'm not one, but if you can see that all kids need as many adults, healthy adults in their life as possible, then you will create a successful, caring, empathetic generation when they know that they belong to so many people.
And I think that speaks to a lot of us who have thought, well, maybe, we can't trust anybody else with our kids, or they just need us. And one thing I have learned through painful experience is that when I try to be better than God to my children, because God gives us many people along the way too, to encourage us, to point us in a direction,
Yeah.
refine our passion. When we don't have that generosity of spirit with our children, we keep them from belonging.
Wow, that's good. Okay, I'm going to read these responses. So the question I asked, I went on my Instagram and I asked them, why is it hard for you to connect with your parents? And they knew I'd be talking to some parents tonight. These are just a few of the things. When I open up, the conversation turns into unsolicited lectures. There's unresolved conflict between us. I feel like I can't talk to them. Growing up, communication wasn't a very big thing in my family, which makes it hard now. Sometimes they just don't understand how I've changed since I've moved away to college. I think that's a big one too for the parents that are dropping their kids off right now. They assume.
And I wonder, can I just interrupt you? Yeah. I think I've had times of separation from my own children, and I've changed, they've changed, but maybe we don't tell each other.
Yes. Communication during those breaks, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Yeah, don't assume that both parties are the same. We should be communicating with each other. How have you grown since I've last seen you? What are new things that I should know?
But not communicating so it will be a teaching moment. Because what I'm hearing from your survey is that you guys don't want teaching moments anymore.
No, that was a very common theme. This is another one that kind of goes along with that. They assume they know what's going on in my life because and this is what in quotes, they know me so well. That's hard. My parents are very conservative and do not approve of Black Lives Matter. It's hard to feel like I need to educate them. My parents expect me to be just like them and to live out their dreams.
So we're talking about a really important principle of psychology right now, which is what we want for our children, but we don't. And that is differentiation. That we want them not to be an extension of us, not to be like us. And that also means not to believe everything that we believe.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just brought up one of the hot topics of these days, Black Lives Matter, and kind of the protest and the passion for racial equity. And I think there is a difference between the generations of maybe passion about that or understanding about that.
Understanding, I think, is huge. Yes.
And do you feel like your generation wants to understand where parents are coming from, or just assumes that they're back in the dark ages and need to be woke to what's going on?
I think it's the secondary one. I think I had a few people respond and say positive comments later on, but that was because they said that their parents they view them as spiritual mentors, and their family has set up a safe place where they feel like they can talk about topics. So if they did disagree on such things, then they would want to understand, okay, parents, why are you feeling this way? But when those foundations aren't set up, I think it can quickly become the secondary one where it's like, gosh, these older generations are just living under these things that are not true. And they grew up on truths that were false and were inclusive of all races. And then I think also like the whole saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We feel as if you guys aren't trying to
Don't call me an old dog.
But like I feel like they feel as if you guys are not, or older generations are not even trying to listen to what is happening. They're just muting it.
So let me read one of the quotes on the feed from a parent of mostly adult children now. She writes, "Parents feel in control when they make every conversation a teaching moment."
Whoa.
And I think that mostly anxiety is about control,
Yeah.
and being in control is exhausting.
Yeah.
You can't have connection. And if our desire is to set our children straight or our parents straight,
Yes.
being right will create disconnection, or the need to be right will create disconnection every time.
Yes.
Instead of trusting, as we said earlier, if your parents belong to God, if your children belong to God, maybe we don't have to be the Holy Spirit and set everybody straight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that we can't hold on to what we believe, but differentiation, when it's healthy, is holding on to what I believe and staying close.
Mm.
So I can speak from this side of the bridge, saying, I'd like to hear maybe sometimes, Mom, I don't really agree with your perspective, but let's go to coffee and talk about something else.
Yes. Sharon, I asked my peers another question, and it said, what are ways that you find connection with your parents? And it's funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of them said just doing activities, like sitting down, getting coffee, golfing, hiking, outdoor activities, mutual interest, talking gossip, common hobbies, doing something that we both enjoy. So I think, again, kind of leaving these high intensity, fragile things, and not saying that they don't exist, but just saying, okay, like you just said, yes, they do exist, and maybe we differ on views, but let's not let that keep us from like going and golfing together today, or going and getting a cup of coffee.
And so I think in order to do that, we have to believe in a deeper story than racial injustice,
Mhm.
a deeper story than terrible leaders, a deeper story than a sneaky virus that has wreaked havoc in our country.
Mhm.
We have to believe, and this is a privilege when this happens, in the story of God that connects us. And I don't know, Grace, where my faith has gone these days, it connects us sometimes whether our children say they believe or not, because
Mm.
God's faithfulness is not dependent on us.
Wow.
His is not dependent on us. It's not about us. And I do think both generations accuse the other of being a bit narcissistic.
Yeah.
I certainly have made those accusations against your generation that it's all about you. And I've heard from clients your age, it's all about my parents and what they think. And anti-narcissism is to create belonging,
Mm.
and that is connected, as you said, what your generation wants, to something more than us. But it's not climate change. It is a God who is writing this strange story we're in to write, believe it or not, welcome and worthiness into every life. No matter what lifestyle you choose, no matter what tattoos you have, no matter what party you vote for politically,
Yeah.
God's welcome is come as you are.
Amen.
It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about me.
Yeah.
And my welcome is not phased by what you do. I mean, as parents, that kind of stirs a lot of emotion in my heart, because I think I welcome my children sometimes on the basis of kind of the vibe in the room.
Mm.
And God is not like that. So as parents, if we can experience that with Him, then maybe we can offer that to our children. And maybe as young people, if you experience that with Him, you can offer that to us raggedy old parents.
Amen. And we're raggedy old hearts as well. We're just not parents. I agree, Sharon. I think that there's such beauty, and I think our generation does need to learn this, of taking ownership of our own lives, and also taking ownership of our family, and seeing, yes, our parents have raised us and they were leaders of the household, But there's kind of this point that happens when you become a college age student or a young adult where your parents are no longer really the leaders and they become friends. And we have just as much of a responsibility to bring that atmosphere into our homes. And I've experienced this coming home from college where I've had such an incredible semester at Baylor, and I really feel like I've gotten close to the Lord and I remember the first semester I really learned about forgiveness, and that wrecked me. And I learned how much bitterness I was holding. I thought I was so powerful because I was holding all this bitterness. And then I let it go. And I remember coming home, and my pastor actually told me, you have the choice to bring what you experienced back home. And I was like, what? And I went home, and I just felt more at ease. And my mom said the first day, she's like, something is different today. And I was like, yeah, and I told her what I learned and everything. I don't know, I have moments of pride, and I've had plenty of moments of pride, but I think that break, I didn't come in telling them I'm this smart Baylor student who knows so much more than you, and you sit down and let me tell you everything that you need to catch up on. But I came in with this posture of just humility and grace and slowness in a way that was just okay with whatever happened, because I was good, Jesus satisfied. And so I didn't need to do anything. It was so freeing.
So what you're saying is that experiencing forgiveness from him of the secrets and the shame that some people carry all their lives, Grace.
True.
But experiencing forgiveness for him allowed you to be open to forgive your parents?
Yes, big time.
And that was relief?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny how when you hold bitterness for so long, it's like you're wearing a backpack with a tons of weights in it, but you've been holding this backpack for so long that you forget that it's there. But when I finally released, there was this moment in church where I just let it go, and I said, I forgive whoever it was. And the backpack came off, and I felt so light. And I had no idea I was carrying so much weight that entire time because I'd just become numb to it. I was so used to holding this around with me all the time.
And I think if, especially your generation wants to fly into the future, you need to let go of those things that weigh you down.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But as parents of adult children, I've been thinking a lot today about a quote from an old writer whose name is G.K. Chesterton. And he said, we read fairy tales to children not so they will be afraid of dragons, because they already know there are dragons. We read fairy tales to children so they will know dragons can be defeated.
Whoa.
And certainly we can think about, defeating some of the social inequities that are happening in our country today, and the political inequities and things in the church that need to be fixed. And I want your generation to be passionate about turning those things upside down. But what if we as parents could show that the dragons of unforgiveness, of resentment, of self-righteousness, of being walled off, of needing to be perfect or needing to look good, could be defeated? Then we're telling a tale that is so good, it has to be true. We're telling the story of the gospel.
Yeah.
That wants to defeat those things that hold us down individually, so that we can be there for one another.
I agree. You've mentioned this so many times in your book of how if we want to make real change, it starts with us, and it just starts at looking at us and digging out that narcissism and digging out that it's all about me mentality. And I just think that it's so, it is this beautiful thing. If you guys as our parents show us the ways in which you have let go of things and have moved on, and showing vulnerability, showing the ways in which you've fell into brokenness and different things, but have conquered it. I think it opens up doors for us to realize, wow, like that's accessible to me. And if I can just from a personal level, then I have more of a fire to do things like climate change and these big movements. But if I can't take care of my personal self, then how in the world am I going to even care for my friend, you know?
And then I feel as a parent, if I can't take care of my personal self,
Yeah.
and fear, shame, secrets, resentments, tricky little grudges that I hold,
Mm.
if I can't take care of them, then how can I hope for my children to want anything I have to offer?
Wow.
Because, like you said, with your peers, you can find belonging to take on those causes,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe not to deal with those inner things that sometimes take a little time and a lot of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And family is the place where I think God intended that to happen, but so often it does not.
Mm-hmm.
So, can I bring up another subject that your generation is famous for? And that is technology, social media,
Yes.
and which can also cause disconnection.
Oh,
When you're lost in your phone and you have 4,000 friends, and yet you don't want to show up for your grandpa's birthday dinner,
mm-hmm.
and help us understand what you find of belonging in social media and what you don't find.
Yeah, that's good. I think why we find belonging in it is because many of us grew up in it and on it. I remember I got my first phone in 8th grade. And keep in mind, I'm 21 and I know friends who are in high school still, and they got their first phone in like elementary school. So
Yeah.
it's getting younger and younger. And also depends on parents and how they parent. But I had social media all of high school, and it's just the way people live. And if you're not on it, it's like you don't even exist, which is so sad. And my younger brother, I admire him so much. He is going to be a freshman in college, and he doesn't have any social media. And I think that is so cool. And he is a unique one because
Yes, I know your brother, and he's going to be a great catch one day.
yeah. But I think what's funny is there is, and I don't know if it's just because I have different friends, but I think there is this rising up of my generation recognizing the unhealthy parts of social media and seeing, wow, I feel belonging to this, but the after effects and the side effects aren't good for me. And so whatever belonging I feel towards this, I don't think it's right.
So,
And
what are the after effects and the side effects?
so after effects would be feeling terrible about yourself because you compared yourself the whole time you were scrolling, or feeling extra lonely because maybe you felt like people were with you when you were on the site, but then once you exit out, you're like, oh wait, I'm actually all alone in my house.
Yes.
Or yeah, I don't know. I just think the intense loneliness is really recognized. And then we have to, I like to acknowledge this, that on social media, there's also a lot of really messed up things, like pornography. And it's so mainstream now that the after effects of that is just shame and just I feel gross and what do I do, and that is something that no one is talking about either. And so there's these books that people are reading now, at least my friends, where it's like the ruthless elimination of hurry. And my friends are just tired of being addicted to their phones because we realize that we're addicted to them. We totally recognize it, and we're just tired of it. We're tired of being tied down to something. And so we have this, like some of my friends are doing this, where we actually put our phones to bed and we make sure that we're like, we don't look at social media past 8 p.m. or whatever it may be. But that's not everybody. And I think that as parents at least, maybe you can host, well, I don't know, because then we don't want to be lectured. So it's this weird in between. But
I know you and I have had meaningful conversations through technology.
mhm.
Of course, you did have to very kindly mock my use of social media and the things I did not know. But I mean, technology also, especially when we're distant, you're in Texas, I'm in Colorado, or because of COVID-19, we can be connected if that's the goal.
Yeah.
If the goal is to compare and compete and show the highlight reels of your life, then it is going to be a disconnecting behavior.
Totally.
And I think what your friends are experiencing is something I actually heard from my friend Chuck DeGrode in the first video cast I did on the church. He said neurobiologically, this disconnection where we pull up our phone and, we're disconnected. So as I'm looking at the feed to see people's comments, I disconnect for a minute and I have to pull myself back to you. That's actually more exhausting than just being here.
Wow.
And so I think your friends may be on to something, because if we want to go after those causes or be passionate about the gospel, we need to find rest.
Yeah.
And rest comes in connection. It does not come from disconnection.
Yes.
And yet we believe as we turn on another episode of whatever it is that everyone's watching right now, which there's nothing that's anyone can watch, because we've watched it all.
Yeah, it's all done.
Or you pour that glass of wine, or you get out your Instagram, you're disconnecting.
Yeah.
And I think that's rest. It's kind of like going to Disney World and waiting in line for 2.5 hours to ride a 3.5-minute roller coaster, and we call that vacation.
Yes. No, that's such a good metaphor. Totally. I totally agree. But also, Sharon, I will say, back to kind of your first question, there is a sense of belonging because, just like you mentioned, we can talk through social media. And I think obviously it's still operating today because there are positives to it. But the biggest thing that we need to make sure we're doing is just drawing healthy boundaries with it. So knowing, how long can I be on this platform for? Or, okay, following this person is actually unhealthy for me and I need to unfollow them. And that's okay. Like, it's just an app. It doesn't mean that you hate that person.
And as parents, I think we have to be humble enough to know that maybe it's sending a Instagram story, which I don't understand yet. Or even, I remember when I learned, if I want to be in contact with my kids, I have to text them, because they do not answer the phone and they do not even listen to my messages.
Wow.
So I could have held out for them to answer the phone, but it takes a humility, which we also learn from the incarnation of Jesus, who was God and yet came down and dwelt among us.
Amen.
And I think we parents could learn a lot from studying the incarnation of Jesus, of just being with people. I loved what you said earlier of when you went home your freshman year, of slowing it down. It's about relationship.
Yeah.
And relationship takes a lot of time.
It does.
And we're not in control of the outcome.
Yeah.
So as Brene Brown said, show up. We allow ourselves to be seen, sometimes looking like a fool, not understanding Instagram stories, maybe needing to be educated on some of the issues of the day. Humility is a connector.
Yeah.
Whereas lecturing, what I'm hearing from your friends, lecturing, self-righteousness, judgment, they're all disconnectors.
That's so good. I think it's also interesting, Sharon, you shared in your book with your daughter when she was in the hospital that you were begging to God. you said, please, I will learn her language. I will do whatever. And I just think the line, I will learn her language. I will become bilingual. I was like, wow, it's so true that like there are just such, it does feel like different languages. Like when I'm speaking to my mom, she's like, what did you just say? Like, and I'm like, oh, it's lit. And she's like, what's lit? You know, like besides slang terms, there's also, you know, like I respond to text more than I do calls. And there's just, I think it's crazy how many differences there are, but yet it's this beautiful challenge to put those aside and to slow down and to bring it back to the basics, which is just sharing a meal together and talking and not looking at your phone. And
Something in my stomach wrenched a little bit when you mentioned that about my daughter, because I saw that she's on the feed tonight, and I'm humbled that she would watch this program. And I think I have worked hard to be like bilingual at different seasons in her life. You know, in middle school, it was learning about Big Bangs and Hairspray. And in high school, it was learning about boyfriends and cheerleading and the girls who were mean and the youth group that was pretty exclusive and inclusive. And then in college, there was another language. And as she's grown into a young woman, I feel like I'm still needing to remind myself that we don't always speak the same language. And that too takes humility.
yes.
And of course, I want her to learn my language.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, as you said earlier, you grow into the maturity
Yes.
to want to do that, to realize, oh, my parents changed too, and maybe they believe some different things, and maybe they've been thinking about some of these current event issues, and maybe they know something about God.
Yeah.
And so as parents, I think we hope for that, but we don't demand it. We show up, we're seen, and we love no matter what. As parents, we ought to be in a better position to do that than our adult children. Because it's taken me 60 years to realize that really is what it is all about. Love God, love others.
Wow.
And then everything else, as C.S. Lewis said, when you make first things first, secondary things fall into place, whatever those secondary things are.
Yeah. That's so good. I love that.
So anything else that you learned in your survey? I want to make sure that we got it all in, because I know you did a lot of work on that.
Well, this is a random thing, but just kind of talking about
someone else wrote on the feed, I think this is really good. Learning a new language is tough. It takes giving yourself grace and being willing to make mistakes.
Yes.
And that's part of the maturing we parents do. Because, when you were little, we didn't want to make any mistakes. We wanted to make sure we fed you the right things and you watched the right things on TV, only listen to classical music and all that stuff. And of course, I gave that up long, way early into childhood.
Baby Beethoven.
But now being willing to make mistakes and acknowledge them.
Yeah.
And go back to the gospel again.
Yes.
Because when I know that the most important thing about me is not my worst day, and my worst days have been in parenting. And the most important thing about me is not my best day, and I kind of think my best days have been in parenting. The most important thing about me is not me.
Wow.
It's God.
Yeah.
In me, and what I can do to get out of the way so that He shows up in my relationships.
Yeah. I think too, Sharon, I don't want to just come across as it's up to the parents to just do all of this work of learning a new language and all of these things, because I also do think that our generation does need to extend double portion of grace to our parents, because they are having to learn a new language and do all of these things to try and keep up with the times. But I think just what you said as well, we need to be learning your language. And something that's interesting is someone commented on my post and said the way that they connect with their parents is by asking them, what were you doing when you were my age? And
Oh, what a great question.
I know. I thought that's so cool because it allows you to see, oh, they were my age once. I think we forget that they used to be kids. And to really ask, wow, you were doing that when you were my age. Wow, times have changed. Or wow, you were doing that when you were my age. We're very similar actually. And so I don't know, I just think that's a little kind of fun question that people can do to connect with their parents. But yeah.
So I love what someone wrote here on the feed that says, beautiful how God has built in developmental opportunities to see our parents as humans, both healthy and unhealthy. And I think, of course, there are developmental opportunities to see our kids as healthy and unhealthy.
Yeah.
So the lessons that you've been talking about forgiveness and mercy and kindness and taking your time.
Yes.
Allow those developmental opportunities to be redemptive.
Amen. That's so good, Sharon. One more thing that I would like to talk about, just that was a huge theme I saw in responses, were that my peers felt like they couldn't be taken seriously when they were talking about their mental health to their parents. Yeah, and I don't.
That's important.
Yeah, and I know that doesn't apply across the board at all, and I know many parents are very good at talking about that, but I think I've heard comments from older generations of, we're just so sensitive now that we're just slapping the word anxiety and depression on everything. And it's really, really damaging my peers, because now if you don't affirm what I'm going through, why would you think I would want to come to you when I'm having a bad day? Or why would you think you'd be the first person I call if I have a boyfriend, if I feel like I can't even share the deepest part of me with you?
And I imagine from parents' perspective, either we've not processed our own mental health issues, and so we can't let it in, or we're afraid. And fear often creates shame. I describe in the book as shame being like that warning light going off on the dashboard of your car, that it's like, something's not right here, but I don't know what to do about it or how to fix it.
Yeah.
And actually, if we just acknowledge that, like, I know something is not right for you, but I don't know what to do about it or fix it. But let's find resources together. I mean, that would dismantle the disconnection right there.
Yeah. Totally.
Just acknowledge, I don't know what to do about it.
Totally.
And I'm a therapist, and I deal with mental health issues all day long. But when it's my own children, I get just as afraid and frozen as any other parent out there. And what I have learned is the most powerful words we as parents of adult children can say are, I don't know.
Wow.
But I want to be with you in this.
Amen. That's so good, Sharon. I think that's what every one of my peers would want to hear from their parents after reading the responses and seeing the various pain and the various circumstances. That statement is ultimately what they're craving.
So someone just wrote on the feed, parents have a hard time hearing if a child is struggling with mental health because they blame themselves and think they have failed. And so maybe that's something that your generation doesn't know, but we keep blaming ourselves. Even when you're 50 years old, we blame ourselves.
Wow.
And I think that is a tool from the enemy. In my conversation last night with Dr. Jim Cofield about therapy, he said something so powerful. He said, you know that God is writing the story when it ends in connection. And the evil one is writing the story when it ends in disconnection.
Whoa.
So if we parents could remember I don't need to have the answers, and it's not about blaming my child or blaming myself.
No.
It is about finding support, help, mercy, compassionate inquiry that leads to connection.
Amen. That's so good.
Well, Grace, I am humbled by all the work that you've done, and I feel like we've had some significant comments, and people really have been impacted by things that you've said. I hope you go back and read the feed on Facebook later.
I will.
And
I'm excited.
I think that people will listen to this, whose kids are going to college right now. And by the way, the big question I hear from parents whose kids are going to college for the first time is, should they keep Live 360 on their phone? Which, for people who don't know, Live 360 is where parents can watch on their phone where their kids are at all times when they're at college. I like that.
I think that needs to be decided between the parents and the kids on what they're comfortable with. But I know my parents don't do that with me, but that's because they know my roommates and I, we all have our locations. So if something does go haywire, we're there for each other. And also we have each other's parents' contact information. So that's just the way we do it. But
yes, I think Live 360 is about being in control. And when your kids go off to college, it's about letting go. They don't belong to you. They were alone.
Yeah.
Grace, thank you for this time tonight. I just wonder if you wanted to end with one word that you would say, whether it's to your generation or to parents, that would be encouraging.
One word.
Or not one word, but you can say a whole sentence if you want.
Statement. Okay. I think I'm gonna end with saying one thing to my generation and then one thing to your generation.
Right.
The thing to my generation would say to listen to your parents, recognize that they're human, and extend a double portion of grace. And to your generation, gosh, I think I would say the same thing.
Yes, I
really
agree.
say the same thing.
Both ways.
Yeah, and tell your kids what you just said of, I don't know, but I will be with you and I'll stand with you, and taking that comment. So
the encouraging word I want to end with actually comes from one of the favorite storytellers that my adult son and I share in common. We both love films and stories and songs, and we love the stories of Tolkien. And I was thinking of the scene where Samwise and Frodo are near the end of their journey, and they are exhausted and discouraged. It's a dark night of the soul. And as they're laying there feeling pretty miserable and like failures, there's a parting in the clouds, and there's one bright star. And Samwise says, there will always be shadows, but they will pass, and there will always be light and beauty. And especially during this season of shadows that we're in, I want us all to remember that the shadows will come and go, but the light remains fixed. And maybe the beauty in it can be that it can be our North Star to lead us to one another.
Wow. Sharon, this was awesome. That was so beautiful. Holy cow.
Oh, holy cow. You are awesome to talk to. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Share this with parents in particular that you know that might be struggling with letting go or finding connection with their children. And Grace, I hope you have a great rest of the night.
Thank you, Sharon. It was an honor to be with you tonight.